Hey, it's Dave from Hooked On Headwaters, and today I'm joined by Mr. Eric Warren. Hi, Eric.
Good to see you again, sir.
Yes, sir. And Eric is with Thumper Spinnerbaits. He actually creates these. He handmade, makes these and ties them. A really fabulous bait. Eric is a longtime follower, subscriber of the channel. I had the great and blessed opportunity to fish with him just recently, where we put out several spinnerbaits on Headwaters Lake. Had just a fabulous time. Eric is also an avid tournament angler from his area, which is South Illinois, which God has been seeing a little wind in that area the last few weeks. A lot of tornadoes in and around that area. Fortunately, no direct hits, but I think you felt some yesterday, right, Eric?
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. There was trash cans flying and limbs coming down. So yeah.
So I hope everyone enjoyed the footage at the beginning of the video. It's I was taken during the time that Eric and I fished Headwaters Lake, and we just had a blast. He is just a gentleman and just one of the good guys in my world.
Thank you.
So before we actually get started into the mechanics of the specifications of spinnerbaits and spinnerbait fishing, I want to ask Eric to give us a little background about himself, about Thumper Spinnerbait. Now, I know it started with his dad, who's no longer with us, and he started the company tying these for himself and then for others. So it's a really, really cool story, really interesting. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric at this point. Give us a little background, talk about Dad, and take it from here.
Thank you, Dave. As Dave said, I'm Eric. I'm Thumper Spinnerbaits out of Southern Illinois. My dad began making these back in, I think it was about 1968. And the way I understand the story is that Dad went to a local sporting goods store called Peaks, and he was buying spinnerbaits at the time. And when he went in, he picked up his spinnerbaits, took them to the counter, and Bill told him, said, sorry, Gail, but we had to raise the price. And Dad said, what do you mean? He says, well, they're 75 cents now, not 50 cents, which is just bizarre to think about now, spending $7, $8, $10 a bait, and he threw a fit over 75 cents. But Dad didn't buy the spinnerbaits. Instead, he went home. He figured out, I got to figure out how I'm going to do this. So he disassembled a spinnerbait that he had been using, and then set about finding the best quality components that he could. So he got a hold of Sampo swivels and started using them. He found his wires, eagle claw hooks, found a supplier for skirts, and lead wasn't really a problem. A lot of guys had wheel weights and stuff. He knew some guys at tire shops. So they donated lead wheel weights to him, and he made his first mold for these out of plaster of Paris, using a box that chicks came in. He poured half the box with plaster, set his bait down in it that he was going to use for his pattern, let that cure and dry. Then he put just a real thin coat of Vaseline to keep the two halves separate, poured the other half over the top of it, and a couple of holes drilled in it, and bingo, he had his first spinnerbait mold. We've since, of course, improved over the plaster mold. Now we got aluminum molds and whatnot, so that's a lot of improvement. But yeah, Dad, he started making them for himself, and pretty soon his buddy that he fished with said, why don't you make me a couple of those? So he did, and as they were catching fish, and they won a couple of tournaments, I do believe, if I remember correct. And the other guys at tournaments were like, well, we want some. So Dad started, making them for those guys. And Dad never advertised these one bit. And it just took off from there. I couldn't imagine how many thousands of baits that Dad sold over 50 plus years of doing this. So, you know, thank you, Dad. But that's pretty much how they came about. Of course, you know, Dad, the last several years that he was with us, he got, I think they call it tremors, where his hands get to shaking real bad. And he couldn't physically make the baits anymore. I went to him one day. I was wanting to make some baits for myself, and he goes, "Well, you know, you're gonna have to make these baits first." You know, these are orders that he had for like a year, and he just couldn't do it no more. About making those baits and filling those orders, and those guys were just so grateful, because these are guys that have used them for 30 years or more, and including some of my friends that have been using them for 20 years. So everybody was just really thankful that I took it up and continued it on for them. So yeah, that's pretty much how we got here.
Right. I love hearing it. It's a great story. You're also a pretty avid tournament angler in that area, and I understand many of your tournament friends also use your baits. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. A lot of these baits have been really popular, I say, for 30, 40 years here. And, you know, Dennis Robbins, we all call him DR, really great guy, outstanding tournament fisherman. You know, there's a lake up here, Wren Lake. It's north of me about 15 miles. And if you're going to compete on Wren Lake and he's fishing that tournament, you're not going to win. You're going to fish for second place. You know, but he uses them consistently. You know, I just took him in December. He ordered 2 dozen. So I took him those baits. And when I dropped those off, he ordered another 2 dozen, which I'm holding for him. He happens to be in Leesburg at the moment. So when he gets back, he's got his other baits, and I'll have to fish against him using them. So we'll see what happens there. And of course, my tournament partners, you know, they throw them as well. So it works out well.
That's good. That's good. Now, you also want to mention fish in Florida quite a bit. So
yes.
So that leads me to ask about those mounts right behind you.
Yeah. The one over here over my shoulder, that's my personal best. And golly, that was caught probably back in the late 80s, maybe, if I can remember that far back. That would come out of Harris Chain. We was fishing on Little Lake Harris, and that was actually a shiner fish. And of course, the other one, that one was actually caught by my dad back in probably like 1974, 75, and it was a 7 1/4, 7.5. And of course, the big one, that's a 10 plus. Outstanding fish.
Yes, it is. Really, really nice. Now, before we jump to the spinnerbaits, there's one more facet of your background. I found it really intriguing when we spoke about, and it's what you do for a living. And you're a coal miner. Working coal mines, and about 3 generations, from what I understand, back that have been working in coal mines. And for us who are not familiar with that type of work environment, certainly I didn't grow up near coal mines, and I don't think there's any in Florida here. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's pretty much most of my family at some point or another has worked in coal mines. My grandfather, he spent, I know, 20 years working for old Ben Coal. And that was, I don't even think when he started, they still didn't have the machines that we use. I think they did a lot of blasting and shoveling to load the coal out. And my dad, he worked for old Ben Coal Company at the same mine that my grandfather worked at, is where Dad started. And he worked his way up, became a boss in the mine. and he got to run some of the first machines to cut coal instead of having to dig it with a pick. And he made friends with a state mine inspector who told him that the federal government was starting this new organization that was going to help enforce coal mining laws to make it safer for everybody. It started out, it was the Mine Enforcement Safety Agency, or administration rather, my pardon there. And it would later evolve into the Mine Safety Health Administration, or MSHA. And they enforce all the federal law pertaining to coal mine that keeps everybody safe and tries to reduce as many accidents and fatalities as can. And Dad spent 28 years there before he retired. And then he tried like heck to keep me out of the coal mines. But there's just nothing that's going to pay that much here. You got kids with high school diplomas that are making $80,000 a year here. And so I started in 2006 at the American Coal Company in Glacier, Illinois, which we actually used to sell. We used to sell our coal on contracts when that mine was open, and we actually shipped down to Florida to some of the power companies there. Little side note. And I worked my way up from shoveling belts, ran a shuttle car for a little over a year, hauling coal from the working faces where they mine it to the belt tail and dump it. Became a roof bolter. Ran the miner for a little while. Didn't really care for that. Went back to the roof bolter. I've been a beltman, been a belt foreman. Then I became a section foreman where they mine the coal, and then became an examiner. And now I'm back to roof bolting again, which is just really the greatest job in the world. Because it's an interesting fact about coal is formed from dead plant matter and organic matter from millions of years ago. And through time and pressure, it turned it into coal. And what makes it interesting is when we're mining this, you got the shale that's underneath the coal, and we find all kinds of fossils. I found snake skins. The interesting ones are we find shark's teeth and shark jaws that still have the teeth in them. And you find big nautilus shells. Well, these are all aquatic creatures, which, most of us are familiar with geography, and Illinois is smack in the middle of the country. And so at one point, Illinois was underwater. We were either a swamp or an ocean, but we were covered in water, and now we're on dry land, which is the interesting part about my job as a roof bolter. We're the only people allowed to be where the roof hasn't been supported yet. So we're the first living things to walk on what was the surface of the earth in several million years. It's really an interesting fact. It can be a dangerous job. We've had 22 fatalities in Illinois since 2008. We just had one right as I was in Florida, actually. And right before that accident happened and took that boy's life, I got hit with a rock. 40-pound rock fell out of the roof, and I got a free ride to the hospital to go get checked out. But mining right now, it's so much safer than it ever has been. The last big explosion that killed lots of people here in this area was, back in, I want to say, the 60s. We had Orient number 2 mine exploded and killed, I think it was 114 or 116 people. So it rated as one of the worst coal mining disasters in the country. But you don't see that no more. We had the big Sago fire, and I think that killed, I want to say, 20-something people. It's been a while since I've read up on that one, but that's the last real big incident we've had in mining. So it's still a great job. A lot of politics involved in it right now, but I know the guys here in Southern Illinois, and I have friends in Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania that mine pole, and we're all going to keep on doing it until we just have to quit. So here's hoping. You're going to have to go, baby girl. Come on.
Got the dog there. Well, Eric, thanks for that. I just great background. I think I felt people like to hear it. I was certainly intrigued with your background, not only how you start the company, but what you do, what your dad did, and what your grandfather did. I want to apologize for the background noise. One of my neighbors is cutting their grass now, so I'll be muting myself out so you can listen to Eric a little better. Okay, so now let's get to the spinner baits. So I'm going to ask Eric to walk us through the components of our spinner baits, how they're rigged, how to fish them, rod and reel, and just give us kind of the 101 on spinner baits. And we're going to get a little technical, which is good. So this is hopefully you guys are going to learn a lot from this. I sure did when Eric explained the inner workings of a spinner bait and how to fish them and methods to fish them. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Eric once again.
Thank you, Dave. All right. All my baits, they start out as lead ingots that I melt down. And we run them through. This is the current mold that we use. Now, just a single cavity. Probably can't see the actual cavity because it's been blacked out. We use a candle, heat that up, and that actually helps the lead pour smoothly and it pours it properly into the mold. But what we use to make these baits, I use a 6-inch, that's probably really hard to see, but it's a 6-inch, 35,000 stainless steel wire. And we use a 2-aught Eagle Claw laser sharp hook. We've been using Eagle Claw for so many years, I can't even remember, probably since Dad started. And they're really great folks to work with. I never have a problem getting hooks from them. But when you pour them, that's a raw bait that's just been poured. This one has a small defect in it, so I can't use it. But this will have to be cut off the pour spout. Then you end up with bait that looks like that. And I'll have to file on that one because you get a ridge around the edge of where the two halves of the mold meet. So I'll file those smooth before I paint them. Our baits are a little different. I don't have the real fancy, make it look like fish scale stuff. These are just, they're solid colors that I make. This one's a chartreuse, but every one of these baits are hand painted. Use 2-part epoxy paint on them. Excuse me, which makes it take a little bit longer to actually get them painted. I'll pour 100 at a time and then have to go through and paint them. Well, they get 1 coat of epoxy primer. So once that's on, it's got to set for 1 day before I can handle them again. Then they'll get 2 coats of white paint over that so that you can hide all the lead completely. Then from there, if they're going to stay white, I'll just go ahead and put the eyes on them, which are hand-painted eyes. They're, in the case of most of them, they're a red eye and a black eye. And each of those takes a day to dry. So white's one of the quickest. Black is also very quick to get painted. When I get into the chartreuse, red, orange, I've got some blues. Then you're starting to talk about 6 days worth of paint time to get them ready. And once you have them ready and painted, I can actually make a completed bait in about 5 minutes. It doesn't take very long to make them. I make several different types. You've got a single spin, nice short arm, really great bait. You can do the tandem willow leaf. which will have a small Colorado blade and a larger willow leaf blade on it, which those are extremely popular down in Florida. And up here in southern Illinois, you get a lot of double Colorado blades. So those are the two types that I make. They're what they call a safety pin type bait, as you can tell by the way the wire's shaped. And as far as the basic components of a spinnerbait, like I say, you've got your hook, of course. And moving up, you got a skirt. These happen to be live rubber skirts. We've been using those. Dad, his first ones were hand tied and hand cut rubber strips, and you only put 8 of them on there. And that got to be too time consuming and expensive, so we went to these. And then, of course, you got your line tie. These here, it's probably hard to see. These are actually twisted on there, as opposed to the R-bin that you find on like Strike King spinnerbaits, Booyah, and some of the others that make an R-bin. And that helps reduce the line getting wrapped around your bait. You know, I do have that one issue with these is the line will wrap around this arm. But then moving down, you got your swivels. You know, the best swivels that I found, kudos to Sampo swivels. They're American made. They're made up in Rome, New York. Mark and the folks up there, great to work with. And I've really not had any real issues with them. Dave and I think we fished for probably 6-7 hours and headwaters and grass, and I don't think we had any swivel failures because of the grass or any kind of weeds getting in them. They're just an outstanding swivel. They work real good. And then you got your blades. The two types that I use willow leaves like this one. And what a willow leaf's going to do is it's not going to give you a whole lot of vibration, but it's going to give you a ton of flash. It's a lot longer profile, and it has more of a bait fish profile than your Colorado blades. Your Colorado blades, they're going to be real big. They've got a nice cup on them, and they'll give off flash, but what they do is they give off a massive vibration. And with that thinner wire that we use, and Dave could attest to it, they will vibrate your rod tip. You can feel that bait real well when you're throwing it. There's other blades that you can use. There's an Indiana blade, which is kind of in between a Colorado and a willow leaf. It's a little bit longer than a Colorado, not quite as narrow and long as a willow leaf, so it gives you kind of a combination of vibration and flash. I've never really had anybody here say that they wanted them, and there's probably dozens of variations of those and finishes and everything else that you can use. Just those happen to be the most popular. And you can get those in multitude of colors, nickel, or some people call it silver, gold, copper, popular, brass, a little duller flash than your golds. But as far as, fishing a spinnerbait, it is such a versatile bait. You can literally fish a spinnerbait all year round. It may not be the best option on a given day. Dave and I, we spent, like I say, 6-7 hours out on headwaters, and 99.9% of that time we were throwing spinnerbaits. And we caught fish. We caught some good fish. We probably could have caught more if we had been throwing something else. That said, I've caught fish in 46-degree water in the early spring and February up here. But you're throwing it real shallow on warm, sunny days, letting it hit the bottom, and just really slow rolling, painfully slow, where you can just feel the blade start to turn. And it takes a while because these are 1/4 ounce baits. They're light, but it's easy to fish them because you can count them down. They fall at 1 foot a second. So if you're fishing 5 foot, count 5 seconds, you're on the bottom. So slow rolling these in the early spring, winter time, you can catch fish with them. I love pre-spawn. As the big fish start moving up, start hitting the points and throw them out across a point and get it down about 8-9 foot, drag it up there until you start to get at that point and just bump it up right up across that point. Really good. But then as you move into the warmer months up here anyway, Dave doesn't have that problem. Super warm there all year. I'm so jealous. But here, once the grass starts coming up, that is prime spinnerbait time. You start getting into the spawn, into the post spawn a little bit. Those fish are going to be hungry as they come off the nests and the beds. And man, like at Headwaters, when I was there, me and Dave fished, that was the perfect situation for this, because you got about anywhere close to a foot of water over the top of the grass. Throw that bait out, start bringing it in, let it get where it's ticking right off the very tops of that grass. And as it hits that grass, give your rod a quick twitch. That'll cause that skirt to flare out. It'll cause the blades to flare. And the fish they love that. And that's the same with any bait. Try to give it a little bit of different action. But when you get to the edge of that grass and at Headwaters, you guys that fish there, you got those big holes in that grass. Bring that bait out to the edge of that grass and just stop. Just let it fall straight down the edges of that grass, and man, the bass will just tear them up. That fall just gets them every time. And another versatile way you can use it as a wake bait, which I love doing, especially post spawn. The fish are chasing shad, trying to get full bellies, get that bait up, get a big weight going from it, and then speed up real quick, cause that blade to bust the surface, and it'll sound just like bait fish popping on top trying to get away. Great way to catch them on a spinnerbait. You can use it as a topwater bait, as a buzz bait. Real easy to do with a single spin Colorado. Get it up there and it'll make a real nice gurgle sound. And I've caught a ton of fish with it. My dad, probably the most inventive I've ever seen with a spinnerbait. Learned a lot from him about it. He'd flip it like a jig. He'd get into a lay down area and he'd literally flip it or pitch it like he would if he was flipping a worm. And he'd just let it fall, and then he'd just lift his rod, get the blades to spin. I don't know how many fish he's caught that way. And accidents happen when you're fishing, especially up here. We got a lot of trees that line our lakes. Some of them have real nice thin branches. You get that bait over that real thin branch, pop your rod tip, work your rod tip, cause that bait to flop on top of the water. And I've caught so many fish doing that, it's just silly. And the limbs are small enough, fish pulls it off, you catch the fish. So I mean, it's unlimited what you can do with these. It's probably the best, most versatile bait. If I had one bait to fish, not just because I make them, but if I only had one bait, it would be a spinnerbait I would have tied on. And as far as what I used to fish them with, my personal rods, this one's a Cash and Icon. I like a 7 foot to 7.5 foot. I much prefer. Sorry about that phone, but I prefer I prefer this one. It's a 7.4. A 7-foot rod will work really well. You know, the extra 4 inches, just a longer rod helps with accuracy. And you want this particular rod. It's a medium heavy action, and I use a moderate fast tip. I like that slower tip. You know, it helps get you some distance that way. And because I fish my spinnerbaits on 30-pound braid, when that fish takes it and I set the hook, I'm not ripping the bait plumb out of the fish's mouth. You know, he's got a chance to get it before the rod loads up, and that's just super important. You know, a lot of guys are going to these extra fast tips, and they're hurting themselves on their bites. They could get so many more fish if they could stay away from the extra fast. You know, go with a moderate fast for your spinnerbaits, and you'll see your hookups improve dramatically. You know, reel wise, I throw Garcia Revos. For my spinnerbaits, I want a high speed reel. I'm throwing a 9.3 to 1, so I'm taking up 40 inches of line every handle turn. This bait is trucking, and you cannot reel this bait fast enough to keep it away from the fish if he's going to hit it. Yeah, so get that high speed reel, because I've actually had fish here, when they hit it, they'll take off straight toward the boat, and your line just goes completely slack, and you've got to haul. You've got to haul the nail to get that line tight so you can get the hook in them. Yeah, so the slower reels, just stay away from them. Yeah, go with something at a minimum. I would go with a 7 something to 1. You know, I prefer the 9s. Well, trailers. Let's talk trailers. I don't run trailers on all mine when I'm fishing them. Depending upon the situation, what the water looks like, I will. It was an interesting thing is, you know, we all know that bass, when they hit a bait, they flare their gills out, causing the bait to suck in is what they're doing. They're sucking the bait in instead of actually going and biting it. So by adding a trailer, you're not looking so much for the action that the trailer gives it as you're wanting the bulk. It'll add a little bit of weight to it as well, but you want that even just a little extra bulk so that fish, when he sucks that in, it's got something there to help it. So, you know, one of the real good trailer, this is a Zoom split tail. This one's just white. If I'm using trailers, this is probably my go-to. But I also like to use Zoom mini flukes and Zoom fluke juniors. This one's a watermelon with red and black flake in it. Notice it's got the straight tail. It's not got a paddle tail. I don't want the paddle tail on there. Or I use a Zoom mini fluke in baby bass color. Again, straight tail, super important. I don't really want a lot of extra movement there, because it's just going to affect the way the bait's running. And I say that's really about the only trailers I use now. If you're if you need a trailer in a pinch, a lot of us carry Zoom trick worms. Super bait to use, but you tear up a lot of them when you're fishing them. Instead of throwing those baits out, you can tear off, 3-inch piece of it, the tail end of it, and keep those. And I've used those. Those are the basic trailers that I use. You can also use, which I have done, is Zoom trick worms. A lot of us throw them. Up here we throw a lot of finesse stuff. So I'll throw Zoom trick worms weightless, and they get tore up real easy. 2, 3, 4 fish and that worm's done. Don't throw those out. Take the tail end of it, cut you off about 3 inches of it, and save those, and you can use those as trailers. And they work really fantastic. Plus, you got a ton of color options with it, including Dave's new favorite color, bright pink. I know he loves it. So yeah, don't throw those out. Keep them. Use those as trailers. Some guys up here, they do throw some chunk trailers on them. I'm not really a fan of that. I prefer a bait fish profile to go with it. So that's really, that's all I use for trailers. I think that pretty well covers most everything about spinnerbaits that I can put out right now without sitting down and spending all day talking to you about it.
Well, that's an awesome lesson on spinnerbaits and fishing them. Very thorough. Thank you so much for that. I know folks appreciate it and will put those methods to use. So I want to mention that you're reeling, when you spoke about the reel, and you're using a 9.3
to 1.
You're really cranking that. That's a speedster.
Yeah. It hauls a mail.
Man. And so with that said, I've got a special clip at the end of the video where Eric he's hooked into a big boy, and he's cranking, and something happens, but stay tuned. It'll be, I'll show you that at the end of the video. It's a surprise.
It's an interesting one.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. After the fact, I got a laugh out of it, but during it was intense. It was intense. So, okay, we have a special announcement, and after fishing with Eric and talking to Dan and some of the other guys, Eric has decided he wants to put together a Headwaters series that can be used in any lake. Any lake, but specifically designed for lakes in Florida here. So I'm going to let Eric talk about that.
Yep. I've been fortunate enough, when I first went to Headwaters, I wanted to find out about the lake and anything I could. And so I ended up finding Hooked On Headwaters and super videos. Well, when I went there, I had talked to Dan and got a chance to meet Dan, and I met Dave. I gave them some baits and said, try these out. They work well up here. I've caught fish in other Florida lakes on them. And I got some good feedback from both Dave and Dan on it. And this last trip down, I got to talking with them, and Florida lakes are, especially like we went to the south end of Headwaters, and that water was super clear.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have one lake here that gets that clear. And you have different bait fish down there than what we have up here.
Right.
And so, speaking with Dan and Dave, I said, what do you need? What colors can we work that'll be proven they'll catch fish consistently in Headwaters? And so we sat down and they gave me a list and they said, this is what we would like to see. So, these are going to be different spinnerbaits for even, some of my folks up here are going to see this video and they're going to be like, Eric, what are you doing to your dad's baits? We're going to modify these skirts. Guys up here, they love their live rubber skirts. The action for them is just crazy, but I can't get the colors that I need. So I'm going to hand-make silicone skirts, and these are going to be specific to the bait fish in Headwaters. We're going to have a golden shiner look. We're going to have just a regular shiner, which general purpose bait fish color. And the bluegill that you guys have are completely different color than what we have up here.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to have a couple of bluegill colored baits to match the bluegill in Headwaters. And like I say, you can use these. They're not just for Headwaters. So my guys up here, you can throw these here, especially in, some of our clearer lakes. They will work fantastic. And I certainly thank Dave and Dan for their input in helping me get these lined out. And we'll have the first demos of them. We'll get to Dan and Dave probably a week or two. And hopefully we'll get real good feedback. And after that, we'll let Dave tell everybody how they work. And, hopefully, if they work, hopefully he tells you. If they don't work, hopefully he'll tell me. Changes we need. But the Headwaters series baits, I'll probably even offer them as a pack. There's going to be 4 colors. So I'll work it out where, you can order a pack of them and you'll get one of each color.
Excellent. So if folks want to order spinnerbaits from you, how should they go about this?
All right. I think Dave has my phone number, so you can get text me on that number. I prefer text because I work straight midnights at the mine, so I'm liable to be sleeping. So just text me, say, hey, I'd like to discuss these baits with you. Yeah. And as soon as I can, I'll call you back, and we'll discuss what you want. And you can tell me what colors you want. I'll ship them to you, no problem. Unfortunately, I don't do PayPal. So I'll have to work that out. But I'll probably open up a PayPal for it so we can take care of that. Or you can look me up on Facebook, Thumper Spinnerbaits. I get tons of orders from guys on Messenger through there. That's a extremely popular way of getting a hold of me. And you can message me. I got a YouTube channel, Thumper Spinnerbaits. Find one of the videos, comment on it, say, hey, I need to talk to you about these baits. And I've also just opened a TikTok to make a higher profile. So you can look me up on TikTok as Thumper Spinnerbaits.
Right. And if all else fails, you're welcome to contact me, and I will work with you guys to get the orders, work with Eric and you guys to get the orders out. So, all right, that brings us to the conclusion of our video. One of our great guests. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for sharing a lot of insight. Fabulous. As I said, I had just a wonderful time with you. A lot of insight was shared. We appreciate that. I encourage folks to support Eric. Buy a spinnerbaits, the Thumper Spinnerbaits from him. Give him a try. He is a genuinely great guy. One of the good guys that's left. And support him. Buy the baits. Check them out. Comment on his page and on our page, Hooked On Headwaters. Let us know how you fishing, how you did. We'd appreciate it. Eric would appreciate the feedback as well. Again, thank you, Eric. Really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Dave. Hope everybody in Florida is having a wonderful time in the sun. I'm dealing with 40-degree weather right now, so and I got a tournament on Saturday to fish.
Oh, what's the forecast for the tournament?
Tournament day, we're looking at 40 degrees at takeoff.
Nice.
High temperature of the day is supposed to be, I think, 65.
Okay.
15-mile-an-hour gust out of the southwest, so it'll be warming up pretty quick. So
yeah. Okay.
It'll be a good tournament.
Well, good luck with that. Let us know how you do for sure.
So everybody in Florida, hope you all stay safe down there. Enjoy Headwaters. I certainly love it down there. And man, you guys just have a fantastic fishery there. So I hope everybody has tight lines and stay safe.
Thank you, Eric. And to everyone, thank you for watching. Please hit that subscribe button below. It really helps us grow the channel, helps us talk to people about the channel. And you guys, we really appreciate you watching. God bless you, everyone, and see you on the next one. Bye.
Tight lines, everybody.